All right. We here, y'all. It's Creative Collection. We here to talk about some important things.
All right, we here with Chief Jungle, aka Mr. Baba, Child Star Seed Protection. We just want to give the youth and our viewers some insight on ways you can do things naturally using your sovereignty. And we're gonna let him explain the rest, and I'll turn it over to Chief Jungle. Thank you for being here with us.
Beautiful, beautiful. First of all, grateful for the opportunity. I just want to express gratitude for this moment in time. So yeah, let's get right into it. I always like to start it off with a story. So typically when I talk to people, just in all walks, we speak on people who read books. So you may have someone who can read a book every other day. You may have someone who can read a book twice a week, or one book every couple weeks, or one book every month. So I was challenged with, okay, so what about the people who can read one book for 6 months? They're able to retain that information, they're able to hone in on the dialogue, and they're able to absorb it in a way where they can actually walk out and start showing off those things that they learned when they were digesting that information for 6 months versus someone who reads a book every other day and switches the book. So, how I like to talk to people is understanding that you are the author of your own book. So, there's a tattoo that I'm looking into getting that I've been thinking about for a really long time, and because I'm into screenwriting. And so, the tattoo goes, "Live life like it's your own movie," and a movie reel. So, I encourage people to see that, hey, you are actually your own author to your own movie. So you have a character, which is your body, the body that we're in now, and you have the opportunity to create a script for yourself just as a book, and remember the book, aka your script, and start moving in that manner. So as far as how I even got to where I am, it's pretty much me creating a script and a life that I want to have based off of my experiences and my testimonies throughout my entire life. So, just to give you I always talk about my whys because my whys are the reason why I'm here. The reason why I felt it was important to deliver my daughter was because of my own uh, experiences and wisdom with my internal belief system on the government, my internal belief system on my experiences that I had being I'm the youngest in my family. So seeing my mother take care of my stepfather and all of the nuances that came with that, whether it be arguing with doctors about prescription or just a whole bunch of once again experiences that led me into being the person that I am today. Now, um, once again, my personal belief systems is different from everybody else. So I tell people like, yo, you have your thumb got this spiral on it. Everybody's spiral is different. Everybody's spiral is unique. So my story isn't everyone's story. A lot of people may not resonate with my belief systems or whatever the case is, which is fine. But I'm only here to give you my testimony based off of purely my experiences. So I'm not a fan of doctors. I'm not a fan of nurses to a particular degree. I'm a fan of emergencies. If ever it needs to be an emergency, sure, we can go to a hospital. But a lot of this is stemmed off of, once again, another testimony I got. I have a spinal injury that I was able to rehab on my own. So not only do I do starseed protection, but part of protecting your starseed is protecting your own body. So I was able to say, forget what a doctor says, because we definitely had some issues with a spine specialist. It was the times where I couldn't really walk. I ended up rehabbing myself within 3 years. So the mental mirror talk. So I have great on my neck. So I tattoo great on my neck so I can see it every single day. Like it's a lot of things that from a upbringing standpoint allow for me to feel comfortable enough to even say, yeah, I'm going to deliver my own daughter. Like if I can rehab my own spine, then I dang on sure can deliver my daughter. That's something I always wanted to do. So the preparation for that would be like, okay, what do doctors typically do when a offspring is born? And I'm looking like, okay, well, they do a lot of extra stuff. Like, and then I started thinking about, because I feel like our foundation is super important. And what I mean by that is um, figuring out like where you really came from, whether that, that's different for everyone else, but whether you feel like you're native to the land or whether you feel like you have lineages in Africa or whether you feel like you don't want to attach to anything, you feel like you're a servant of God, so you being attached to something makes you more narrow. Like in so many ways, or you can play, like I said, you have your own book, your own character. You can be these people in certain situations when it benefits. So like, for example, if we wanted to try to get land, you may want to operate in your tribal capacity if you know that you're Cherokee, if you know you're such and such. If you want to get dual citizenship, you may want to act in your genealogical capacity where it says that you have such and such in a different country. So it's like, or you can operate under God if you don't want to be attached to any of that in that moment. So it's like really wordplay and vocabulary words. Um, but yeah, to get back on the delivering my daughter, I feel as though um, there's just so many things that I looked at and I was like, okay, I can do that. And then I think about our ancestors and I think about how powerful women are in general. And then I look at nature and how they're able to, the women are able to have their offspring without any assistance or. So I'm also a fitness, I guess, consultant as well. And I help people like mentally tap into just parts of themselves that allows for them to rewire their, I guess, their book that they're telling themselves. And yeah, in doing that, I just feel like anybody can do it. I'm just a guide. Like if I feel like the women can produce on her own or reproduce on her own, all I need to do is be there and support her. So that's everything I was trying to get throughout that whole process. So I'm in the breath work. So we get the breath work done. We get the breathing down. If I know you already are capable of it, then all I need to do is just understand energy. So everything is about energy. Um, knowing when masculine energy is a little too much and knowing when I need feminine energy. So throughout that process, it was just me and her, but there were certain times where I needed to call the feminine energy to come in to balance out the situation. So not to get too deep into the labor, but the labor was 19 hours. It was quite the treat. Uh, it was quite the treat. And in doing that, I became a minister, meaning that the way that I feel about the government, once again, is coming from my past experiences. But so I decided that I don't want my daughter to be a part of the state, which would mean that she doesn't have a birth certificate, which also means that I'm going to have to do a lot more work to justify her in a system that I don't want her in. So I ended up becoming a minister. I created a family Bible, which is very traditional and something that was going on way before they came here and we allowed for them to set up shop on our land. So before that was a thing, we were already documenting our legacy. We were already documenting our unionships and departures and arrivals and things like that. So because that's so natural and that's so traditional, we don't actually need permission to do something that we did before they came here and we told them that they can do whatever that they wanted to do. We just needed treaties with them. So the idea behind the family Bible is secondary form of citizenship or secondary form of evidence. You can take these early forms of evidence to the Department of State and get a passport. And so the Department of State, if you don't know, most people do though, Department of State is the mediators between international travel. So the way that you would travel internationally without your offspring having a birth certificate, you would need a few things such as you need a DS-10, they call that a birth affidavit. You have a birth announcement, things that you'll put in a newspaper. I'm a fan of the newspaper. I'm a fan of anything that's ancient. I'm a fan of fountain pens, things like that, because we have to go back to how things used to be to have the most impact from a psychology standpoint. So imagine if you get a scroll versus, you know, your normal sheet of paper. You'd be like, whoa, hold on, man, send me a whole scroll, like, whoa. And then you have, you know, wax seals. You know, not too many people still do the wax seals where you know, drip the candle wax and then you got the boom. That's more I call those more authentic, more original, more back in the day. So I'm a fan of that. And yeah, what else? So in birthing her into, so my baptism is based off of my own personal belief. So if you have a Bible, whatever your morals and your beliefs are, that's essentially the constitution of your Bible, of your family. Now I tell people about wordplay because vocabulary words are super important. People as guardians, you're not parents because those are a pair of people who rent something. So when I try to break these things down, is how do you speak to public officials? So my goal is to give people real world practical situations so they don't get hemmed up in situations, not even manifested situations. But for instance, I never say that I have, you know, a child. I say I have property because she is my property. I have security interests. The fact that I have a security interest means I'm securing her. Not only that, but I'm a trustee. So we have to deal with trust relationships. When we understand trust, we know that everything is a trust. You entrusted me to get on this call right now. So everything is that. So me as a guardian, I'm the trustee to ensure that her life and her liberty and her pursuit of happiness is a-okay. If there's anything that needs to be brought to my attention, it needs to be brought to my attention. You know, you're not going to exercise power of attorney over my daughter. You're not going to, you know, exercise mental, medical, or any of that because I have all of those things taken care of. So, and once again, I got here because of my experiences with the government as well. So another testimony is I had a felony case a couple years ago that I was able to beat without a lawyer, and that case was stemmed around cultivating what they deemed as marijuana, but I call it gatulati. And gatulati is just essentially the same thing, but the wordplay will say that Gatulati isn't something that's in their federal database, but weed, marijuana, all of that is. So if I'm claiming one thing that isn't one thing, and it's a bigger story than that, but I'm just giving you the gist of vocabulary words and actually being a subject to the words if you start speaking as if you are those things. So for instance, if a police officer says, "Are you driving?" and you say yes, then you're now under their jurisdiction versus if you're traveling because you're supposed to be traveling, that's your natural right. So all of these things that's going on in my psyche, and I'm like, yo, now I don't know how many times I've been around in this world before, but I see through all of these things. So the best thing for me, I feel like my calling for like my daughter to get here was for me to be able to solidify her citizenships in multiple countries and also put her in a position where she isn't subject to anything, but also I'm not a fan of the United States, honestly. For my own personal reasons, this is why I want to leave the country, and I plan on doing that rather quickly. So once again, my own experiences is my own experiences. However, I want to make sure that I'm safe as a Black man in America, and also I want to make sure that my partner is safe as a Black woman in America. And then once again, my daughter. So putting all of us in a church or putting all of us in a ministry is the best way to do that, because when you start moving biblically, you start moving under principles. So principles overshadow everything. So you can have modes, you can have methods, you can have codes of procedures. All of these things are obsolete when you talk about God's law and nature's law. So you literally, once again, I was talking about creating your own book. You create your own book, you create your own script. The script is your script on how you want to handle situations in life. You memorize your script, you be confident in your script called role play, and then you go out and you essentially live the life that you wrote for yourself. Um, so what else? I'm trying to think of some of the things that you was asking about. But yeah, as far as like the importance of the family Bible, once again, you can document your marriages, but we call them unionships, but you document all these things so you don't have to let someone know everything that you're doing. So the object for me is to stay as private as possible and use public when I need to use public. Like there's no way everybody should know exactly where I live at. Like nobody should know where I live at because that's where I live. So instead, I'm going to get either a virtual office or a virtual mailbox, a brick and mortar or a UPS address. I'm going to funnel you to somewhere, and then I'll go get it from there. So it's just like little things when you do a LLC, you may not want to be the owner. So just to give you another example, like my vehicle or my automobile, I'm not the owner of my automobile. My trust is the owner of the automobile. So the reason why the trust is so I'm not held liable for anything that happens to the automobile. I could be smoking in there. There could be bottles in there. It doesn't matter because the owner of that vehicle isn't me. So, and then also I'm not going to be having any of those things in there, but I'm only saying that to say you now don't have liability. Same thing. There might be men in here who have firearms. That firearm is in your name. So if anything happens to that firearm, your name is on there. So the goal is to take liability off of everything that you do and put it in something that you can control on the back end. That way, you're just a controller. You're not held physically liable for anything. And that means your body as well. So, like this birth certificate is essentially something that the government gave you to attach you to it. So, we can't be a birth certificate. We can never be a number. So, what we are is a spirit controlling the body. And that body, like I said earlier, is your character of that book that you're creating for yourself. So you're not actually your body, you're the spirit in the body controlling the body, right? So then once you once you realize all of that, then you can separate yourself because, like, for instance, they may say, you owe this. I don't owe this. I'm the spirit. I can't owe anything. You know what I'm saying? But the body may owe this. Now, if the body owes this, there should be a way that I can articulate my words and speak in a biblical way in which y'all should be able to offset all of this. So I got on this knowledge because when I got my felony case, the people that I reached out to, they were ISOF law, and they was giving me, a whole bunch of things that I should try to put into my case. Fast forward, after I beat the case, I ended up meeting the owner of ISOF law. He came to Virginia, so I went to go see him, and then that fast forward into them offering me a consult job with them. And I've been with them for maybe like 2 years, or no, maybe like a year and a half now, or maybe a year now. It ain't been too long. And so that's how I got into that journey. And yeah, everything is just based off my own experiences. I wouldn't have never got here without like probably all of it. Yeah, if not, yeah, they all, yeah.
Incredible.
Appreciate it.
Incredible. I really want to commend you because the way that you got up and I think you just mastered the idea of manifestation and really just embodied it. And that sounds incredible to me. I'm just listening and I'm like, wow, like I know it took a lot of heart to go through all of those things you went through and decide to say, you know what, let me learn about this. Let me build my faith. Let me build my knowledge, and let me take this approach. Let me do something nobody's done. Let me do something. Let me be something completely different. I'm my own man. I'm my own person. I'm my own spirit, and let me just go with that. I commend you for that a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Definitely.
Yeah, man, we could definitely keep rocking. I don't really, I'm just here, I'm enjoying the moment. I feel like this is a great vibe, and I appreciate all of y'all for listening. And yeah, so I don't know if anybody in here has offsprings other than the Empress that's on the thing, but
Yeah.
role play and vocabulary words is everything, and that's like the biggest because I educate people on the idea of sovereignty. So let me correct you because I do remember sovereign citizen is something that you never want to say because the government has this way of tying certain words to certain things. So when I say if you say you're a driver, you're now subject to the jurisdiction of someone who's a driver. AKA you went to the DMV, you got a license, you got registered, so now you're the property because now you have the driver's license. Now, if you say you're a sovereign citizen, the federal government has a way of saying that makes you a terrorist. So sometimes people may get caught up in this newer, because apparently this is called the age of information, where not only is there information, there's an influx of too much information, so much information that we don't know which information is the real information. However, when you look at like the fact that it's so much information, that means you need to do a little more discernment of what information that you're trying to absorb in your psyche. Yeah, trying to think of some other stuff that.
So when like even the language, the vocabulary, like you said, like we have the right to remain silent when we don't want to self-incriminate ourselves. So it's like if you don't know those certain laws, like basically So we're in this system with this colorable law and
Yeah.
tort law and things like that. So I feel like when it comes to commercial law, they're mimicking the law of Moses, right? So it's like, how do you function? Like, how is it working for you to stay private, and how do you for the youth, like how do they call themselves? Because everybody's like, oh, I'm a god and a goddess, but when you're dealing with these entities, you
Right.
you say like I'm simply a natural man or woman.
Right.
Because you're not a person, you can't say you're a person. That
Right.
too, right?
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
so how
Yeah.
do you go about that? And how is it working for you?
I mean, it's working swell for me. I don't have no smoke, but I say that because I know a holistic way of looking at things. So not only I set myself up because I like psychology. One, because psychology is like what they do on us. So I reverse engineer everything that they do on us back on them. Now, if they say we have a birth certificate, then you create your own birth certificate. If they took your wet ink footprint, then you create your own wet ink footprint. So now what you're doing is you're battling them with yours if you ever needed to. Now, when it comes to any public officer, I want people to think about the only times that officers really bother you is when you try to go from A to B. So essentially, I think the biggest protection is what I want to make sure I'm protected in my house. I want to make sure I'm protected when I go from A to B, and I want to be protected when I travel from such and such, whether that's land or whether that's on water. So, but for the most part, a lot of us get in situations just traveling from A to B and coming back home. So, how you prevent that is psychology, meaning that if you put your vehicle into a trust, then psychology is going to say when they run your plates, they don't have like a person now. So now you got to think about what does that look like for that person traveling behind you when he reads that it's in a trust. Now he's going to think hypothetically, like am I gonna have to deal with a lot more now because I don't know what the trust is about. I don't know who owns the trust. I don't know who this person is when I pull them over, if I decide to pull them over. So you know what? I think I'm gonna just go weave around this person, and then I'm gonna just go. He's the 1%. There's 99 other percent of people that I can pull over. It's not in my best interest to pull this person over. So I've been in plenty situations
Would
where,
good question. Would the trust be would the trust to the system consist of like basically be seen as like, oh, this is a business?
yeah, so you can draft it up that way, but for the sake of the DMV, all they want to know is the number of the trust, the EIN of the trust, and the fact that it's operational. So you have a trust agreement, like the same thing, like what an LLC needs an operation agreement, the trust needs the same thing. It's just called um, articles of association. It's literally like the same thing.
So that's another question, really quick, off topic, but you design and royalty wanted to know like what's the difference between private license plates given in a trust and state license plates, and how do they uphold equal or less value?
Yeah, so now when it comes to private place, if you get private place, then you have to be willing to put more people on notice, which costs more money. Also, you have to be ready to get pulled over. So they're going to pull you over no matter what because um, every time they run your place, it's not going to come up. So if it's not going to come up, that's automatic grounds, regardless, to pull you over because outside looking in, they're just doing their job. Outside looking in, you're just traveling. So now it's a situation where you have to either educate this person, get his superior. He's probably still going to write you a ticket. So know, like, all right, so when you overstand people's duties, like his main purpose is to give you a ticket and let the judge deal with you. Like that's like I don't or formulate its own opinion. So now I can write you something based off of you incriminating yourself. So they're only there to mediate you to the judge. So whatever they give you to mediate you to the judge, how you sign it just is all that matters. So some people don't want to take the ticket, or some people don't want to like they just but when you operate biblically or you operate in equity, you don't act as like you're a rebel or you're belligerent or you respectfully say what you got to say. Oh, okay, you want me to sign that? Perfect. I'm going to sign it this way. You know what I'm saying? Here you go. and I'm going to beat this, typically you would have to go to federal court. So this is why people have to make certain decisions on what battles they want to fight, because going to federal court in Virginia is $400. Now, the reason why I say federal court is because they uphold the Constitution and they uphold these natural rights of us. But these local courts, they just be smacking you around. So I say that because either you're going to meet someone who is going to not give you a ticket, but it's going to take long, and you're going to need to probably speak to his superior. Meanwhile, they're going to call the backup squad to try to, psychology scare you. Then you got to go back and forth, or you may meet someone who actually knows and just lets you go, or you may meet an asshole. So it's like, if you want to deal with that, that's perfectly fine. Now, because I have a daughter, I decided to do both, meaning that I went to the DMV and I put it in their system as a trust. That way, when I take the plates off and I put my private plates on, if ever they found my VIN number, it will still be in the trust and I still know how to articulate my words. So like, I'm not telling people to do that. I'm just saying that's something that I do. Now, when it comes to getting tickets, when it comes to getting your car towed, all of these things you got to understand. You're the minority of this information in a world where it's like, oh, a tow truck. Oh, I'm gonna tow this guy. Like the owner of this automobile, the person who's towing it has no idea. Like, oh, I'm towing somebody who's a national who's on the surface of they don't know that. They're just like, oh, this is a regular vehicle. It's not until they take it where there's become these like constitutional violations. But in that moment, like, it's really nothing that could happen. Like, you can't really do nothing if you're in the house, if the car gets towed. But if it's in the trust, you have two different ways. Like, if you let the police department know about your automobile being in the trust, then you can get the police department to go get the vehicle for you. And I usually tell people the only way you can do that is if your car is registered. But like I said, if you swap the plates or whatever the case is, they can still get the vehicle based off the VIN number of the vehicle. Like, hey, but once again, every time you put your vehicle in the trust, depending on what area that you live in. So like, I live in Richmond City, so I know the sheriff's name is Miss Urban. So I sent Miss Urban my paperwork and I got her card. And then I know if I go up, I'm in Henrico, that's Alyssa Gregory. So it's important, like when I say psychology, it's important to know their bosses' names too. So if you get pulled over, like, oh, what county am I in? Oh yeah, Miss Gregory. Like, oh, you know Miss Gregory? Like, yeah, she got my paperwork. So it's like knowing, yeah. So, and then the last thing, well, not the last thing, but multiple things is I always tell people to speak as if they have people behind them. Like, I always speak as if I was sent somewhere, or I always speak as if my legal team told me to do so. So like, my counsel told me this. That takes like, you always take liability off of you. Why are you signing it this way? Oh, well, my legal team and my counsel advised for me to sign this way, so I'm protecting my constitutional rights. Are you a lawyer? No. Okay, well, then you can't even educate me on how I can properly sign. So you sign it the proper way, you sign without prejudice. You can even write, I do not consent. I do not want, whatever you want to write on there, you write it because it's your world. You know what I'm saying? You're living in your world because remember, you wrote that book and you're just living that book. So if you're saying I'm under God, you write, I'm under God. There's no wrong way, there's no right way. It's the way that you wrote for yourself. And then you publish everything that you say. So like everything that so say you had you wanted to create a script. And every time I go to court, not even to manifest it, but if I ever went to court, this is what I'm going to say. So I'm going to publish this in the newspaper to have like how do I say it? A form of evidence that can't be rebutted, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I essentially do that. So when it comes to my family Bible, I tell people that
public record.
You have the reason why I do the newspapers, I don't do anything else. I used to do like all of those other things that you may have heard, like UCCs or filing in the clerk. So I only file one thing in the clerk, and that's my power of attorney, which I actually should speak on that too. Well, if people don't know, you have a power of attorney, and you also have something called power of attorney directives. And because we're speaking on the Starseed protection, it's important that like guardians realize that when they go into a hospital, if they don't have these things on record for their profile, the hospital, because first of all, you went in their hospital, so they're already presuming jurisdiction in that space in itself. So if you don't exercise mental power of attorney, they're going to deem you incompetent if ever they give you anything like a drug or whatever that can waive your consciousness, whether it's 0.0001. If it waives it just a little bit, they're going to try to exercise mental power of attorney. So women who give birth in hospitals that have epidurals or they have whatever that goes on, and then they re-ask them certain questions that they may not have wanted in the beginning, like, hey, I don't want a vitamin K no more, like, or whatever the case, are you sure, like, you're going to be endangering your baby and da 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 da. So then that's when that friction comes. But now you're in their hospital, you didn't give them anything that told them that if I was ever unable to speak, these are the other people, whether that's my midwife, whether that's my husband, these are the other people that's going to speak on behalf of my mental. So you can't exercise that over me, and you can't call CPS, you can't call nobody. Like my medical, not only is my mental power of attorney, not only is my mental power of attorney on my directives, but also my medical. So you can't tell me what I don't want when I have my other medical ones who can back me up if I can't speak for myself. So that's super important. Yeah, the power of attorney is super important. The reserving your rights is super important. And then just walking in your book is super important. Um,
Yeah, that's very true because I went through it just giving birth a year ago and we got 5 minutes. So I gave them 8 pages of declination of, you know, their products.
right,
And I said, I want all of your staff, everyone that write their name and every drug that you're giving me, and I'm saying I decline.
right.
And they like, oh, we'll look over it. And then they looked over it and came back like hours later and was like, oh, well, our lawyer said we can't sign outside paperwork. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, okay, so then that's the, you're giving me the okay, like I'm good, thank
Right,
you.
yeah,
So if you don't serve them with your
right,
own paperwork
right.
stating like, I'm not one of them, then it's like they're gonna do whatever to you. So that's
Right. Yep.
a
Yep.
testimony
Having
that's
to
very true.
express yourself. They say the word, the mouth speaking the words is how you get your remedy, but also having that paperwork to validate you is important too as well. I don't mind showing y'all a couple things that I have, what I created for my daughter too as well. We can do that when we
Right.
come back, just as
Yes,
something to look forward
you
to.
can.
Um,
Mhm.
what else though?
The sigil, is that
Oh yeah, yeah. So the sigils is, so I have a family crescent seal, and the sigils are for the individual people in our household. So me, my partner, my daughter has our own individual sigil underneath the our owl, because that's our ministry logo. And I feel like that's important to a degree. Like people don't have to have a sigil, but I just think it's unique. And
that
for
like similar to a logo?
Yep, it's the same thing as a logo. Yeah, it's just called a sigil. Yeah. hmm I consider that the allegiance portion of my Starseed protection. So allegiance means when you remember in school, you used to pledge our allegiance. So once again, you reverse engineer history. You need to pledge your allegiance to your house, your ministry, your home, your family. And just as, they did a Declaration of Independence, once again, reverse engineer history. They allegedly felt like England was, doing all of this stuff and they wouldn't listen to him and da 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 da. So they was like, man, I need to declare my independence and separate ourselves from the tyranny and the government of England. You know, funny, we still being ran by England, but nonetheless, the idea is, okay, so that's what y'all did. So I'm gonna do the same thing, reverse engineering. You may not need to call it the Declaration of Independence, but I call mine the Pledge of Allegiance. And I also we have things called injunctions and things like that. So my idea of an injunction is essentially your Declaration of Independence, which I named the Pledge of Allegiance. So essentially, it's the same thing. You let them know, like they say, when in the course of human events, one must da 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 da. You innovate that, create it, make it your own. Once again, this is your world, so you make it as such, and you just move in a biblical way where it's just like okay, and honestly, that biblical way is. Hmm. Oh, so I didn't mean it. I mean to tell y'all this. So you have a public and a private version. So your public version is biblical, your private version is nature based. So this goes and this caters to people who may not actually or I don't know, people who really don't cling to the Bible per se. The reason why I mention the Bible so much is because the world is ran off of that. So if you play the game, then that means that, okay, well, then I'm gonna become a minister then. All right, well, then I'm gonna create a ministry then. Okay, well, then I'm gonna start moving in the way that the world was shaped so I can benefit in that space. Now, if I don't necessarily believe that, that's cool. That's why I have my private me, my actual spirit, because remember, this is a character. This character isn't really you. So you can actually pretend to be this person, even if you didn't subscribe to all of those things. It's just like, yo, it's more than just Christianity and a Bible. It's actually verses. Like these verses are what's as important, not actually the connotation of it needs to be wrapped in Christianity. So, different strokes, different folks. But I like to tell people that when you play a game or like you play whatever games that people would play, you create an avatar. So that's not you. You're just really controlling it for the benefit of,
Exactly.
say you want to get EBT, or you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, go
We're
out there
gonna
and get
we're
some
gonna
EBT.
come we're gonna come back and hold that thought. We're gonna
Yep.
come back and hop right back in
Okay,
and
wonderful.
continue from there.
All
All
right.
right.